Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8,
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. And what a show we've got for you today.
Today is the day the budget normally starts to unravel, so we'll be joined by Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, to let us know if there are any grenades lurking in that budget.
And Conservative Party Chairman Greg Hands will be in the studio to face the music. Is this a budget that really squeezes the wealth creators?
And the Prince of Privacy, the Duke of Sussex's libel case is ongoing at the Royal Courts of Justice. We'll be crossing live to update you throughout the show.
And as ever this morning, we want to hear from you, so get involved with the show. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before that, let's have your latest headlines with Rory.
Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. It is understood that striking doctors could meet the Health Secretary to discuss a pay rise as soon as this afternoon. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay increase for junior doctors, saying their pay has fallen in real terms by 26% since 2008. Meanwhile, NHS workers will now vote on whether to accept a new pay offer, which includes a 5% pay rise from April and a one-off lump sum for the last financial year. But Chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds, said the pay talks should have happened sooner.
Rishi Sunak and his ministers did not sit down and have that proper negotiation on pay for a very, very long time. And it's been estimated that about 140,000 operations and appointments were cancelled because of the impact of that industrial action. And that's even before you take the junior doctors' strike into account that's just started. So, the Conservatives have got to learn from this. They can't make the same mistakes when it comes to the junior doctors.
Meanwhile, the Education Secretary will meet with the unions today as part of intensive talks which will continue over the weekend. They will discuss teacher pay, conditions and workload reduction. The unions agreed not to strike over the next 2 weeks as discussions continue. Killers with a history of coercive or controlling behaviour towards their victims are to face tougher sentences. Under new government plans, excessive or gratuitous violence will be a factor when sentencing for murder. The changes follow recommendations made in an independent review into domestic homicide sentencing. The government will respond in full to the Wade review in the summer. Dominic Raab has refused to comment on an ongoing investigation into bullying allegations against him. An independent inquiry into formal complaints made by senior civil servants is coming to a close. In an interview with GB News to discuss the tougher sentencing for criminals with a history of coercive behaviour, the Justice Secretary said he was not going to comment on the allegations.
Sorry, just to be clear, I'm not going to comment on the investigation. It would be improper for me to do so. It would be contrary to the rules. I'm not going to respond to anonymous reports in the media. But can I just say, any equivalence that you're drawing between anything that I may have been accused of and the kinds of horrific crimes that I'm talking about today is preposterous and frankly unconscionable.
The former Home Secretary has warned GB News there is a culture of collusion to target Boris Johnson. Priti Patel questioned the objectivity of some MPs investigating claims that the former Prime Minister misled Parliament over lockdown parties. She also spoke of her concerns that civil servant Sue Gray has now been hired to work for the Labour Party. Ms Patel says it is putting our democracy in a very bad light.
So I think there has to be some serious questions asked about all of this. And Dan, you also followed in recent weeks, the issues around Keir Starmer, Sue Gray, all these types of things. They're not happening in isolation. I use the word collusion. You've just used the other word as well, and corruption. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
The latest hearing in Prince Harry's libel claim against the Mail on Sunday will take place later today. The Duke of Sussex is suing Associated Newspapers Limited over an article about security arrangements for him and his family when being in the UK. Passport office workers will strike for 5 weeks, starting next month, in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the public and commercial services will walk out from the 3rd of April to the 5th of May across England, Scotland and Wales. The union says the action could have a significant impact on the delivery of passports. Rolls-Royce has secured funding to build a nuclear reactor for a base on the moon. The UK Space Agency has given the company £2.9 million for the micro-reactor programme, which looks into how nuclear power could one day support a full-time moon base. It is hoped it will provide enough energy for communications, life support and experiments. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Rory. And we're joined throughout the show today by former Labour MP Simon Dunchuk, and he's an author too, and Conservative peer Lord Daniel Moylan. So good morning to you both. Hello.
But first, Britain faces a tough squeeze on public spending, paired with the highest tax burden since the Second World War after Jeremy Hunt's budget announcement on Wednesday, with the Chancellor insisting that his plan is necessary to rebalance the nation's finances.
So are we heading towards a decade of stagnating living standards, or are there reasons to celebrate the budget? Well, we're joined now by Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Morning there, Paul. Now, usually by today, things are unravelling in the budget. People will find the things that we call the nasties lurking in the fine print. Is there anything there that you've spotted that you think we should be wary about, or is it cause for celebration for you?
Well, it's a fairly normal kind of budget, which is a huge relief after some of what we had last year. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. If you're the parent of a young child or expecting to have a child soon, you're going to be celebrating the spending on childcare. The other big, there were two big things in the budget, actually. One was the childcare change. The other really big thing was the corporation tax change, which may sound terribly technical, but the corporation tax rate, the government a couple of years ago announced it was going to go up a lot next month. The Chancellor has mitigated that somewhat by offering some really big reliefs against investment, which is very positive, but he's limited that for 3 years. And the reason he's limited that for 3 years is he ran out of money in the last couple of years of his forecast. And I think that, unfortunately, just introduces a lot more uncertainty into that system.
Paul, I just wonder, the Chancellor sort of lauded this budget for saying about cutting taxes on business investment that you were just talking about there, but he's increasing corporation tax from 19 to 25%. I mean, how do you assess the budget in terms of business investment? Are we likely to see more business investment as a result of this budget, or less?
Well, as a result of this budget specifically, we should see more over the next 2 or 3 years. But if, as I say, if this is genuinely only a temporary relief, which is what the Chancellor announced, then we'll get less investment 4 and 5 years down the road, which is why it was frankly absurd to offer this as a temporary change to the system. We've got this, as you say, huge increase in the rate of corporation tax, but actually offsetting that with these additional investment incentives makes quite a lot of sense. Net, actually, it's quite hard to tell what the overall effect would be, but given the increase in corporation tax, increasing these investment incentives certainly makes sense and will help in investment in the short run. But the
you
real
say
problem
that, Paul,
here,
but I
is
thought
just
in the hidden table
corporation tax, it's gone up and down and up and down and round and round and round and round. And actually, if companies need something, whatever the structure of the tax, they actually just need to know what it's going to be. And once again, they're left with absolutely no idea what's happening.
Well, I get the certainty there, but as for will this be a growth budget, the OBR hidden in their table didn't see that it would be about bringing investment and growth. So I just thought it was a little bit of taking a lot of money from you and giving you a little bit, directing you where you spend it.
Well, certainly over the next few years, a lot of money is being taken away. The tax burden is rising by about £100 billion over the first half of this decade to levels we've literally never seen before. So that there's a very big increase in tax, and that reflects a combination of all of the demands on spending and the fact that growth has been so feeble. And with a lot of demand on spending and feeble growth, you're really not left with much choice other than to put up taxes unless you can find some really big spending cuts to make. If you look at this budget specifically, I mean, the OBR did score a small increase in growth as a result of the people that they hope will come back into the labour force as a result of the childcare changes, the pension changes, some other small changes. But that's actually quite small beer relative to, for example, simply the change in the assumptions about the level of inward migration, which will do more to help growth than everything else, actually, in the budget.
Paul, politics is a strange business, but economics seems an even stranger one to me. It seems that, if the government expects to be in an absolutely traumatic financial position and finds itself merely in a dire financial position, everyone says that the Chancellor's got lots of headroom for spending more money and cutting taxes and whatever, ignoring the fact that the public finances are in a dire strait. We used to be in a situation where we would borrow money in the bad years and build up a surplus in the good years, and it would all even itself out in an economic cycle. The question I've got, the million-dollar question I always ask people, and I wonder what your view is on this: when will we have a government in this country next that balances its budget in a single financial year? Or have we just given up as a country, ever thinking that we will ever do that again?
Paul might have given you the answer there. He started laughing in the question.
Well, we don't need, I mean, it's been 22, 23 years since we actually balanced the budget. We don't need to balance the budget actually to get debt down. As long as the borrowing is small enough relative to growth, then the debt will come down over time. But there's the rub. We've got very little growth. And with very little growth, with the fact we've got high levels of debt at the moment, and put on top of that the fact we've got very high levels of debt interest spending because of what's been happening to interest rates, we're in actually really quite a difficult position. Because you put those three things together and you need to run very, very small deficits relative to everything we've done over the last 15, 20 years in order to stop debt continuing on a rising path. And the OBR said, I think one of the most interesting things the Office of Budget Responsibility said in its document accompanying the budget was that this Chancellor has got a more difficult job than any of its predecessors in terms of controlling the debt level because of that horrible combination of high debt, high interest rates and low growth.
Paul Johnson, doyen of economics from the Institute of Finance for Fiscal Studies, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Bringing back our guests, Simon Danchuk and Lord Moylan. Daniel, what did you make of the budget? Would you have liked to have seen a bigger push for growth?
I would have liked to have seen a bigger push for growth, but I'd also like to ask a couple of questions of Paul Johnson, who's gone now. So the first is, he takes it for granted that business investment is a good thing. Well, it isn't always. Some investments are good and they get good returns. Some investments are a waste of money. When you start setting up a tax system that encourages companies just to invest, you will see a lot of quite poor quality investment going ahead because it's actually, you've reduced the financial risk. You're getting paid to make investments by getting a tax rebate.
And that's what I was alluding to. It was taking a lot and directing you how to spend.
So this is the government deciding how businesses should be spending their surpluses and their profits and directing them in a certain direction. But it's a very blunt instrument, and it doesn't actually guarantee that you're going to get good investments that create jobs and profits for the future out of this. You will get a lot of waste in it as well.
I also thought when you looked at the corporation taxes going up from 19 to 25% and the billions it was bringing, that they said they're giving half of it back. I just wondered, should they not have just then, if they had to raise corporation tax, just take it up by a couple of percent, 19 to 21, not up to 25 if they're giving half it back?
But then they wouldn't have had this element of control,
well, that's what I'm
which is
talking
what
about.
they want. They want to control and direct what companies and businesses do. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say, if I've got time, is that I worry socially where we're going as a society when basically we're now saying that 9-month-olds can be brought up by the state.
We're going to come on to that later. We'll come on to that.
I won't anticipate that.
Simon, Esther, in her article in the Daily Express today, said that this was a budget that Gordon Brown could have delivered. What, as a former Labour MP, do you see that?
I think there's some truth in that. It's a very safe budget, isn't it? There's no doubt about that. It's not inspirational.
I'd question safe. With the word safe, it was...
Well, he's not scaring the horses. It isn't a quasi-Kwarteng mini-budget from September last year, and so politically it's kept everything relatively calm. It's not a general election winning budget, that's for sure, and it's not visionary and it's not inspirational, so it's relatively safe. And in that respect, it's quite disappointing. The corporation tax rise, I think, is appalling. 25% is just ridiculous. It's off the chart. And as you point out, if you're going to make some other amendments to how you deal with business, then just make it clearer, you know.
Do you think this budget then was done to wrong foot Keir Starmer? Is that when you're calling it safe? Because he really didn't seem to know what to do, and the Labour Party don't seem to have any response to the budget.
They've really struggled to criticise it, haven't they? there. And there is, I think there's an article in the New Statesman magazine this week which shows that the two parties converging on policy, and so there's very little between them, and that's an issue for the electorate. They want to see
the only
some
one they want
difference.
to change is the sort of the pension,
Yes.
the pension allowances,
Yes.
the lifetime allowances. Look, you're both staying with us. We've got lots to talk about. There's lots in that budget, and as you said, the childcare and what that actually means, and is the state getting too involved? But look, coming up, we'll be joined in the studio by the Conservative Party chairman, Greg Hands. We're going to put some pressure on him, so don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:20 now. It's been 2 days since the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, delivered his budget, and the calculations are still being made as to who will be better or worse off.
With the tax burden at its highest level since World War II and the government's pledge to stop the boats facing legal and political backlash, we're joined by Conservative Party Chairman Greg Hands. Greg, thank you for coming in and joining us. Let's start with the budget. Look, we've got high taxes, highest tax burden since the Second World War. We've got no growth, pretty much, in the country in the country this year. We've got a decline in living standards. It's hardly something for a Conservative government to be boasting about, is it?
Well, I think we have to look at the context, which is obviously recovering from the pandemic, paying off a lot of what we did, the support we gave to the economy, to businesses, to individuals during the pandemic, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which spiked inflation and energy prices. We're still coming out of that. So we're still making sure the public finances recover from the shock of that the last couple of years. But clearly, we do want to be getting down taxes in the medium term. That is also a priority for the government.
And I guess that's where we might part ways, because I would have said, don't, the people who are going to be the wealth creators, make sure that they are able to do that. So the corporation tax, lots of Conservatives in the paper today, lots of the Lords MPs are saying, why did that go up? We don't agree with that going up. So why?
Well, we've still got the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7. It's worth remembering we have reduced corporation tax quite a bit.
But it'll be double island now, so people like AstraZeneca, who would have come to Cheshire, aren't anymore.
Well, we're still very competitive overall on corporation tax, and with the changes we made in terms of the tax cut for investment, which I heard earlier Daniel's not keen on, but is overall quite a significant 25 billion tax cut over 3 years, encouraging businesses to invest. We're also doing big measures to encourage people to get back into the workforce. The announcements on childcare, the lifting of the pension cap will bring people back into the workforce. That's been one of the challenges after the pandemic, has been not enough people have returned to the workforce. That is something we're working on as well.
As you mentioned what Daniel said, Daniel, do you want to talk about that? The control, you thought, the unnecessary control of what business should and shouldn't be doing?
Well, I mean, it's David Cameron's government, George Osborne's government, lowered corporation tax. They brought it down to a very low historical level of 19%, but they eliminated an awful lot of these sort of tax breaks. So you had a simpler structure. Simpler structures are usually better. And you weren't trying to direct businesses what they should be doing with their money. And as a Conservative, I was very comfortable with that. And this is a different approach. This is a bit more, to be honest, Greg, where bit more like Gordon Brown, sort of directing companies what they should be doing. And it is the case that investment in general might be good, but not every investment is good. And there'll be some investments made by business now, marginally profitable, that they'll do for the tax break, which basically will mean some of the money will just get wasted. And it's
Well, it's a tax break to incentivise investment. Daniel is right that not all investments turn out to be successful. Not every business turns out to be successful. But since 2010, we've actually got 1 million extra businesses in this country. We've grown that from 4.6 million to 5.6 million. So the number of businesses has really increased under this government. We're making sure that people are incentivised to invest for the future, particularly in manufacturing, to make sure that the UK is equipped for the future, high, good-paying jobs, bringing people back into the workforce. That's what the economic recovery is all about.
Will taxes be lower at the next election than they are today?
Well, it's obviously there'll be further fiscal events over the course of this year. Next year, we'll have to see. But certainly the hope of the government is to be able to bring down that tax burden. We're uncomfortable having the taxes, some of the taxes at the rate that they are.
So is everybody else. You're uncomfortable, the government's uncomfortable.
Of course, we would like to see lower taxes, but we also have to bear in mind the context. It's only a year since Putin invaded Ukraine, the shockwave that sent, particularly in inflation. Our main purpose at the moment is to bring inflation down. Really good news on getting inflation, the forecast down to 2.9% by the end of the year. That is kind of really good progress on Rishi Sunak's top priorities of halving inflation, growing the economy and reducing debt.
Well, talking about Rishi Sunak's priorities, one that many of our viewers are concerned about are the boats coming across the channel. One of his pledges was to stop the boats. Now, we've had the illegal migration bill that went through the second reading in the Commons earlier this week. Is the government really going to stop the boats? I mean, we've heard all of this before, haven't we? Last time it was a Nationality and Borders bill. That was going to sort it out. That made absolutely no difference at all. How much confidence can our viewers have that the government really are going to stop the boats once and for all and will do whatever it takes to do so?
Well, it's a very strong pledge, and the legislation is very, very good that's in place. And people are right to be concerned. 45,000 people came on small boats to this country last year. 3/4 of them were adult males aged under 40. The most frequent country they come from is Albania. This is a case where people rightly want to see tough action being taken, and that's why the illegal immigration bill is in place. We're looking forward to pushing it further through Parliament and making sure that the new scheme, the new measures are up and running as quickly as possible.
Are you going to compromise on something? I mean, I've heard sort of some Conservative MPs possibly on the other side of the spectrum to me, saying that they wanted to put down amendments to weaken it. It's a bit like Brexit again, where you have this unholy alliance of opposition MPs and a small number of Tory MPs wanting to try and dilute it. Is the government going to resist that? And are you going to press on and not compromise on this?
Well, we'll have to look at whatever amendments are put down, but I think Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman have laid out very clearly the course that they want to set, which is to take tough action and make sure that the right laws are in place. We've also negotiated agreements with France, with Albania. We're talking to the European Court in Strasbourg as well. We're actually trying to do this in a constructive way, but leave people in no doubt that tough action is being taken to make sure that doesn't happen.
If the European Court rules against anything that the government's doing, are you actually prepared to ignore their rulings? Just as the last Labour government did over votes for prisoners. Are you prepared to do that, or are you just going to cave in to whatever decisions they take?
Well, let's wait and see. We are talking to the court at the moment, and we're passing the legislation. Let's wait and see. I think that's a hypothetical case, but let's be in no doubt that the British people want to see tough action be taken. That is what we're doing.
Now, Rishi's doing a lot of work at the moment, whether it's a Windsor framework, whether it's a small boat sorting it out, this budget here, looking at childcare. I'm wondering, is an election going to be here sooner than you think, a general election here sooner than you think? And I'm just wondering, and you can't say you can't win an election unless you've got a united party, so I'm wondering how united within are you seeing it as the party chairman? I see Boris was reselected last night too. So the Trussites, the Borisites, the Rushyites.
Well, I think the party's actually in an improving place, Esther. Had a really difficult year last year. But Rishi has laid out the 5 priorities at the start of this year. The Windsor framework, the Parliamentary Party had a very successful away day a couple of weeks ago. We've got the boats legislation in place. We've got the budget. We've got a spring conference coming up next weekend. It's actually very much an improving situation, but we've got a long way to go. We still have quite significant challenges out.
As a former Labour MP, Simon, what would you say to the Conservative Party chairman?
Well, I do think it's looking better for the Conservatives. Rishi's steadied the ship, hasn't he? Things are a little bit calmer under Sunak. But you have got Conservative MPs who are speaking out against the small boats policy. I'm wholly in favour of the illegal immigration bill, and yet you have Conservative MPs who are speaking out against it. And I just wonder why that is. You need Conservative MPs who are Conservative and who are going to tackle these issues.
What do you think Labour will be most worried about? They didn't seem to have an answer for the budget. They didn't really know what they were going to do there. They don't seem to be prepared. What would you be worried about as a Labour MP now?
Yeah, I think Starmer's got a problem. He hasn't provided any vision. He's obviously concerned that the Conservatives are going to steal some of the policies, and we can talk about childcare perhaps in relation to that. He will feel that that's been stolen from him. So he's not providing much vision for the country, and I think that's a concern for Labour. He's hoping to win on the basis of the Conservatives performing badly, and I don't think that's enough. I think there's all to play for. I think it's completely undecided who will win the
Should that not worry Conservative voters, though, Greg, that Simon says that the government's stealing Labour clothes? I mean, that's not really what you want to hear if you're a Conservative, is it?
Well, I think where I do agree with Simon is that there's no enthusiasm for Sir Keir Starmer. I've never been to a single door in my constituency or anywhere across the country where anybody has said to me that they really want to vote for Keir Starmer.
Put it another way.
OK, it's not as negative as Corbyn.
Well,
I used to get a lot of people come to the door saying, I'm never going to vote for Corbyn, and maybe they don't as much for Starmer, but nobody comes to the door to me enthusiastic in any way about Keir Starmer.
Well, Simon, I think, Greg might have a point there. Absolutely not Corbyn, but they're not saying it's Brown and Blair, Keir and Reeves, are they?
I would agree with you. I mean, Keir Starmer is soft left, isn't he? And he's from that sort of traditional North London Labour place, and he doesn't have a great appeal. He's certainly not Tony Blair, that is for sure.
Daniel, what do you think about that? If the Tories are stealing Labour's clothes to get this budget through, do you think that is something for the Tory party to worry about, those people maybe peeling off to reform?
I think it is, because the fact is that the political landscape has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And we saw that partly in the Brexit vote, but we see it in other ways as well. And it's not just on the right. I mean, there's momentum. There are all sorts of people on the left, stop the whatever, you know. The politics has been more radicalised, and the parties do need to speak to that. And the George Eaton article that was referred to in the New Statesman, suggesting that basically the two parties have merged in policy terms, is something that both of them should worry about, I think.
Thanks, Daniel. Greg, Hans?
Well, I disagree with that. I mean, I think there is clear blue water between a strong, competent government under Rishi Sunak, with the role of the state being proportionate compared to Sir Keir Starmer, very much as North London, as Simon put it, his kind of North London perspective on the world, which has not chimed with people out there. Rishi Sunak is becoming increasingly popular, I think, with the population out there, and that's why the Conservative polls are starting to recover.
Greg Hans, Conservative Party Chairman, thank you very much indeed for coming in and joining us this morning. Now, coming up, we'll be speaking to sports presenter Ed Chamberlain, who'll share his tips ahead of the Gold Cup at Cheltenham today. So see you after the break.
Good morning. It's 32 minutes past 10. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. It is understood that striking doctors could meet the Health Secretary to discuss a pay rise as soon as this afternoon. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay increase for junior doctors, saying their pay has fallen in real terms by 26% since 2008. Meanwhile, NHS workers will now vote on whether to accept a new pay offer, which includes a 5% pay rise from April and a one-off lump sum for the last financial year. But Chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds, says the pay talks should have happened sooner.
Rishi Sunak and his ministers did not sit down and have that proper negotiation on pay for a very, very long time. And it's been estimated that about 140,000 operations and appointments were cancelled because of the impact of that industrial action. And that's even before you take the junior doctors' strike into account that's just started. So, the Conservatives have got to learn from this. They can't make the same mistakes when it comes to the junior doctors.
Meanwhile, the Education Secretary will meet with unions today as part of intensive talks over teacher pay, conditions and workload reduction. The unions agreed not to strike over the next 2 weeks as discussions continue. Killers with a history of coercive or controlling behaviour towards their victims are to face tougher sentences. Under new government plans, excessive or gratuitous violence will be a factor when sentencing for murder. The changes follow recommendations made in an independent review into domestic homicide sentencing. The government will respond in full to the Wade review in the summer. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, it's 10:38. Now, the Cheltenham Festival is gearing up for its biggest race today, the Gold Cup, the last of 4 days of the biggest week in British horse racing.
Yes, well, we're joined now by ITV's main presenter, Ed Chamberlain. Ed, great to see you. So this is one of the country's biggest sporting events. I want to know who's been there, how many people have been there, and what it means to the country as a sport.
So, Esther, we started on Tuesday with a day like no other, to be honest. There was over 60,000 people here. We had a huge audience at home. And it was probably the best advert for the sport of horse race you could ever imagine. If I could have written the script, it would have gone the way it did. We had a horse called Constitution Hill, who absolutely blitzed the field in the champion hurdle. And then it was raw emotion, Esther, when Honeysuckle won with Rachel Blackmore in the mare's hurdle. Not only is Honeysuckle an absolute heroine for this sport, she'd won 2 champion hurdles. It was her final race, but she was ridden by Rachel Blackmore, who's the darling of the sport, everyone loves. And the trainer was Henry de Bromhead, whose son died in a tragic accident last September. This was his first winner since then here at Cheltenham, and the outpouring of love from the stands was spine-tingling, to be honest. And I remember looking at my 2 co-presenters who were both in tears, and trying to put words to it was difficult. I tried to say as little as possible. And then we had a tremendous day on Wednesday, pretty good day on Thursday in the rain, but we're now set for the biggest of the lot. This is Cheltenham Gold Cup Day. This is as big as it gets in this sport. This is the race everyone wants to win. This is the sort of purist race, if you like. The Grand National in a few weeks' time is the big public race. But everyone in racing, whether you're a groom, a jockey, a trainer or an owner, you want to win the Gold Cup.
Yeah, I want to know who's there. As a star spotter, you had Princess Anne was there, Queen Camilla's been there, Carol Vorderman was there, I think Matt Hancock and his girlfriend was there. It seemed it was a big place for stars this week.
It always is. It always is. Yesterday I was with Johnny Bairstow, the cricketer, who tipped up a horse called Good Time Johnny that won at 10-1, so that was pretty cool. And there are lots of sports people here today. There are footballers here today. I don't know whether Queen Consort's here today. As you say, she was here on Wednesday. The Princess Royal loves it. Zara Tyndall is on the board here, so she's here every day. And that shot you've got there was after the champion chase. Remembers the Queen Mother. It's called the Queen Mother Champion Chase. So a lovely moment there with the Queen Consort giving the prizes to the dominant Willie Mullins team. And that was the blue of the Brighton owner, Tony Bloom, who won that race with a horse called Energumene, and then Brighton won in the evening. So he had the absolute dream day on Wednesday.
Ed, obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best week of the year, but I did notice that the crowds have been down at Cheltenham this year. Do we know what we put that down to? Is it the train strike that's been on? Is it the cost of living crisis? Is the price of tickets too high? What do people put that down to?
I think everyone puts it down to the brilliant ITV coverage, to be honest. Everyone stays at home to watch it. No, I think it's a combination of a number of things. It's only down a small amount. It'll be absolutely packed here today, and I put it mainly down. Train strikes and things don't help, obviously, but there's a cost of living crisis, as we all know. But the crowds have felt huge. Being here, it's felt absolutely like a normal Cheltenham festival. It's felt like a real buzz, big crowds. So until I read that, I honestly hadn't even noticed.
For St. Patrick's Day today.
Well, we sort of celebrated St. Patrick's Day yesterday, strangely. They call it St. Patrick's Thursday. We got the day slightly wrong, but we had a big party yesterday. We might as well have another one today.
Exactly. Now, I know you're right about the ITV coverage, Ed, which is terrific, and I know that ITV have signed a new contract with British Racing to cover it for the next few years, so that's great news. But look, we're going to put you on the spot. You're the expert. You're the main ITV racing presenter. It's the Cheltenham Gold Cup today, Ed, so come on, tell our viewers what is going to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup today.
No pressure.
Thankfully, I classify myself as a presenter, not a pundit, but I do listen to other people. So there's every chance that Galopin Des Champs might be different class here, but he's too short a price. My heart wants Rachel Blackmore to win again on A Plus Tard like last year. My head has backed a horse called Statler, each way at around 10-1 in the Gold Cup. I'd be amazed if he's not in the first four. And earlier today, the bet of the day is a horse called Pembroke in our second live race today.
There we go.
I was going to say, thank you very much. You've made Philip's day now that he knows where he's going to put a flutter on. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Get back to all the fun and all the racing.
So get off back Pembroke and Statler, and if they don't win,
blame Ed.
We know who to blame. Exactly.
Now, Jeremy Hunt's, but I'll tell you one thing that did upset me, though, and this is about those train strikes and those rail strikes and the impact they're having across the country and the impact they're having just on things like that, the high street racing events. It's a shocker. Now, look, but totally different. Jeremy Hunt's first budget as Chancellor has highlighted the importance of childcare provision in the push for growth.
The Chancellor will extend free childcare provision to all children from 9 months. Will this incentivise parents into work, or is it an unnecessary extension of the welfare state?
Well, we're joined now by Neil Leach, CEO of Early Years Alliance, to tell us more. So it should be, it was a bumper day for you, the budget. Surely you must be pleased with the announcements.
Everybody tells me that I should be really excited by it, but somehow I'm not. I have to say this. I mean, for parents, yes.
£4 billion and you're not happy?
But the reality is that, from our perspective, the devil is in the detail, and what's been presented at this particular point in time is a plan, yes, to support 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds, but absolutely minimum support for the existing crisis that we have. So at the moment, you know, the majority of children coming through are 3- and 4-year-olds. And we've seen record closures in the last 12 months. Nearly 5,500 settings have closed their doors. We've seen staff leaving in droves. We have a recruitment and retention crisis. So nothing has been done about the infrastructure. All that's really been done is a promise to add on a bit more of a disaster if we're not careful. So
hang on,
I confess,
Neil,
I'm
a
not
bit more is £4 billion of extra support. So let's put it in the context. And I'm amazed you're not slightly positive about that, if you don't mind me saying.
But doesn't the ratios, the government are changing the ratio, so rather than it being, one staff for every 4 children, they're changing it to 1 member of staff for every 5 children. So when you say that they're not doing anything about capacity in the system, that in itself will deliver more capacity in the sector, won't it?
Well, let me say, first of all, that on the £4 billion, it's irrelevant. The amount of money is irrelevant. If it's not sufficient, it's irrelevant. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it is irrelevant. If it's not enough for the offer, then it doesn't make a difference. In terms of the ratios, of course, it allows providers to take on more children. Are we excited by that? I'm afraid we're not. And the reason we're not is this will compromise the safety and the well-being of young children.
Really? They do it in Scotland already.
Alluded to the fact that people are leaving in droves because they are exhausted and they are undervalued. It isn't simply just dumping another child into the pot and we are expected to look after them and watch them. We're educating them. So I'm afraid nobody wants this. Parents don't want it. Your viewers don't want it.
Neil?
Educators don't want it. It's just a ruse, basically, to try and create a different environment for more children to come in.
But Neil, they already do this in Scotland, so I don't really see that it's a crisis for safety of children. But surely it's parental choice, isn't it? If the parent's happy to send somebody who's looking after 5 children, surely that's their choice. If they don't want to send their child to somebody who's looking after 5 children, then presumably they won't. What's wrong with parents being able to make that choice? Why do you have to tell them how many children there should be in the setting?
Well, first of all, if you talk to educators in Scotland and you ask them, would they rather work with less children so they could have more time with those children? The answer is they will tell you, of course they would. No, they're not exactly impressed with this. And all the evidence tells you that if you're working with fewer children, you have the opportunity to bring them on. So that's the first point that I would make. In terms of choice of parents, parents don't want this. I've said this before. Parents do not want this. They recognise how difficult it is to look after 4 2-year-olds, never mind 5 2-year-olds.
So what do parents want then, Neil?
It's a choice.
Neil, what do parents want then?
They want a government that gives them a solid offer. But they want an environment where their child developments. This isn't just about getting parents back into work. This is about creating good citizens, educating our young children, making sure that they care for our planet. Get it right in the early years, the rest will follow. That's what parents want, a balanced life. They do not want cheap childcare at the expense of the safety and the well-being and the development of their child. Ask a parent, no one will
Neil
say,
Leach,
thank
you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and we'll bring that debate into the studio here with us. So, Daniel, what did you have to say there? 4 billion isn't enough. He's telling us what parents need. I'm wondering about sort of the stay-at-home mums. What have they got who've decided to stay with the child rather than putting them into childcare?
Well, I can't comment on what he was saying because he knows the business and how it works, and I don't, that's his expertise. So it's not for me to comment on that, but I worry about the bigger social questions. I mean, I'm very elderly, I didn't see the inside of a school until I was 5. And I don't think, if I'm weird, that's not the reason, OK? I think that didn't affect me. I didn't learn about climate change at the age of 2, and I wasn't brought up as a good citizen at the age of 9 months. We've now got a situation where instead of strengthening families, in my view, we're forcing people to go out to work, both families, both members, both parents to go out to work. Even then, many of them can't afford to get on the housing ladder. And we're institutionalising, we're nationalising the care of their children. This is a socialist sort of dream, isn't
Simon,
it?
on this point, I mean, who is... we're extending... This is an extension of the welfare state, quite clearly. I mean, people might say, well, who is responsible for bringing up their children and looking after them or paying for them to be looked after? Is it the state or is it the parents?
I have to declare an interest here. I have 4 children and I ought to have more in the future. And I welcome this policy, actually. I think it's a step in the right direction. What you've got to bear in mind is we have unemployment at 3.7%, lowest unemployment since the 1970s. But the crucial point is we have 10 million people economically inactive who aren't in work. And we have to get some of those back into employment. And some of those are mothers or fathers who need childcare support. And this policy is about helping get some of those 10 million people back into employment. Contributing positively.
Isn't that something to do with employers paying them properly?
But when unemployment goes up, the government aren't going to reverse this policy, are they, and say, well, we don't actually need that many people now in work. Well, we can do away with this. So
the budget each budget has to adjust to the circumstances.
But you can't take it away once you've started it.
Well, you can, and they often do, don't they? But I think it should be welcomed. I think Neil does a disservice to his sector, actually. I'm amazed that he doesn't appreciate the fact that £4 billion of taxpayers' money is going into the... into the sector. I mean, it is a tough sector in which to work, but that investment
But bringing
is welcome.
up Neil's point, if he was saying, like some people say, actually it costs £10 an hour and they're only getting £6.66 from the government, it isn't enough. So looking at it the other way, rather than, and I'll bring in Daniel's point here, rather than children going in from 9 months old, aren't you better to say it'll still be 3 and 4 year olds, but actually we'll pay then more per hour rather than less per hour, as it were, but going into taking a child at 9 months, which I'd say was very young.
Yeah, from my experience, I think the mothers, fathers want to get back into employment as soon as possible, and that childcare from 9 months onwards, and it's optional, obviously, it will be welcomed. I think it will be really welcomed.
The one thing that did make me smile when I read it, it said if you're working 16 hours or more, you can have 30 hours of free childcare. I'm thinking, well, where's all the number? Why is that? Surely if you're only working 16 hours, you can only get 16. Surely you should pay a little bit of wraparound support of getting there and back. I don't know, what were you thinking about the hours and the support and the amount?
Well, it's like all these things. Once you get into the detail, you find a lot of unintended consequences. And every one of these schemes, there are people employed, really clever people, to make them more complicated just for its own sake.
To keep them in a job.
Yeah, maybe.
Thank you. Now, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt unveiled a major policy for tackling the number of senior NHS doctors reducing their hours or taking early retirement because of high taxation charges on their pensions.
Hunt announced a package of measures, including scrapping the lifetime allowance on how much can be saved tax-free in an NHS pension and raising the threshold for the annual allowance. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Lawrence Gurlis. So, are you pleased with this package? Do you think what its intention was to bring those doctors, to bring those surgeons and high-paid medics back into the workforce? Do you think this will have an impact?
Esther, it already has. A number of doctors already contacted their employers yesterday to cancel their retirement plans and to plan to not only go back to work, but to put in extra sessions. Because for a lot of senior consultants, they do have some spare time. They could get the waiting list down by putting in extra sessions, but there's a financial disincentive, as it stood with the pension plan, not to do that. So that's already had a significant effect. And it's the right thing to do. The BMA have been on about this. A number of senior doctors have been pushing for this for a long time. It's taken a long time to get to this. I was hoping it would come up in the budget, and it has, and it will solve a lot of retention problems for senior, experienced doctors in the NHS, and that has to be a good thing.
Dr. Gurlis, this is billed as one of the most expensive parts of the budget. It's going to cost, according to the figures from the OBR, £835 million a year by the year 2027-28. Is there not a more cost-effective way of getting more doctors into work?
Well, we've already seen that the Labour Party said they're going to cancel this anyway. And I think the problem with that is created a huge amount of uncertainty. This, and in fact, it could have a perverse effect because this plan doesn't come in until April next year, April 2024. I think there'll be an election later that year. So you could find a lot of doctors retiring between April and the election, and actually could make, at that point, it could make it worse. At the moment, people are just celebrating what's been done, and they're looking forward to coming back to work. Look, there are a lot of hospital doctors. In fact, the number of doctors in hospitals has gone up over the last few years. So the GPs are in more of a crisis. But what we can't lose is the most experienced and the most highly skilled surgeons and consultants. And I think if it retains them, that must be a good thing for patients and for the health service generally.
It's interesting because it was front page of the Telegraph what you're talking about there, that the whole of the pension sector could be thrown into chaos. Here you go, this extra support, and should Labour win, they'd reverse it. Was that them deliberately trying to spike this pension policy by doing that, by creating this uncertainty?
Well, I'm not a political person, and I respect you and other people who are. I think it was probably a knee-jerk reaction, trying to say it's the 1% benefit from this. Look, people who save into their pension, they're not saving public money, they're saving their own money. And that, that begs the question as to who owns the money. Is it the person that's earned it, or is it the government? And I think it was a purely political move, and it has created a bit of uncertainty in the pension industry. And unless we have some clarity, I think the Labour Party have said that they will maybe make an exception for doctors, but I actually think that's discriminatory. I mean, what about people who are other professionals who also have pension pots over the current lifetime allowance? I think it's unfair to discriminate against them. So my view is it should be for everyone if you're going to bring this in at all. This is going to be an ongoing row for the next 2 years, I'm afraid.
Dr. Lawrence Gurlis, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
So, Simon, mistake by Labour then to say we're going to reverse this. Have they made a huge possible election mistake?
I think they've been struggling to criticise the budget, and we talked about this earlier, didn't we? They were looking for issues in which to criticise the budget, and this is what they've picked up on. And there is some dispute within the party, isn't there? Wes Streeting, the shadow health secretary, is all in favour of lifetime allowances for GPs and consultants in the NHS, so that they can be retained, and yet you've got Rachel Reeves coming out and announcing that they will reverse the policy. So there's some contradiction within the Labour Party.
So maybe tensions within. Simon,
absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. And Daniel too. That's it for the first hour of the show. But don't go anywhere. After this short break, we'll be covering more on the fallout from the budget and asking, are we giving away too much in foreign aid and to the wrong countries? Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Morning with Esther and Philip here on GB News. Coming up in this hour.
Should we be giving foreign aid to fast-growing economies like India? We'll be talking this through with Stephen Bryan of the Legatum Institute.
And as the government plans more devolution to the regions, we'll be asking a regional mayor if there is a democratic mandate and whether or not devolution divides the country.
And keep your views coming in. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before all of that, here's the latest news headlines with Rory.
Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. It is understood that striking doctors could meet the Health Secretary to discuss a pay rise as soon as this afternoon. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay increase for junior doctors, saying their pay has fallen in real terms by 26% since 2008. Meanwhile, NHS workers will now vote on whether to accept a new pay offer, which includes a 5% pay rise from April and a one-off lump sum for the last financial year. But Chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds, says pay talks should have happened sooner.
Sunak and his ministers did not sit down and have that proper negotiation on pay for a very, very long time. And it's been estimated that about 140,000 operations and appointments were cancelled because of the impact of that industrial action. And that's even before you take the junior doctors' strike into account that's just started. So, the Conservatives have got to learn from this. They can't make the same mistakes when it comes to the junior doctors.
Meanwhile, the Education Secretary will meet with unions today as part of intensive talks over teacher pay, conditions and workload reduction. The unions have agreed not to strike over the next 2 weeks as discussions continue. Killers with a history of coercive or controlling behaviour towards their victims are to face tougher sentences. A new law will require courts to consider a history of violent acts before convicting murderers. The changes follow recommendations made by lawyer Claire Wade in an independent review into domestic homicide sentencing. The government will respond in full to the Wade review this summer. Dominic Raab says it would be improper for him to comment on an ongoing investigation into bullying allegations against him. An independent inquiry into formal complaints made by senior civil servants is coming to a close. In an interview with GB News to discuss the tougher sentencing for criminals with a history of coercive behaviour, the Justice Secretary said he was not going to comment on the allegations.
I've been very transparent about all of these things, but I'm not going to comment on the inquiry while it's undergoing. Just to be clear, anyone that does is breaching the rules of the inquiry, and I'm not going to do that because, as I say, I'm committed to behaving with professional integrity.
The former Home Secretary has warned GB News there is a culture of collusion to target Boris Johnson. Priti Patel questioned the objectivity of some MPs investigating claims that the former Prime Minister misled Parliament. She also spoke of her concerns that civil servant Sue Gray has now been hired to work for the Labour Party. Ms Patel says it is putting our democracy in a very bad light.
I think there has to be some serious questions asked about all of this. And Dan, you also followed in recent weeks, the issues around Keir Starmer, Sue Gray, all these types of things. They're not happening in isolation. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
The latest hearing in Prince Harry's libel claim against the Mail on Sunday will take place later today. The Duke of Sussex is suing Associated Newspapers Limited over an article about security arrangements for him and his family when being in the UK. A committee of MPs have referred Royal Mail to the regulator Ofcom over letter delivery. The MPs say the company has systematically failed to deliver letters 6 days a week. They also say Royal Mail's CEO was not clear about using technology to track and discipline workers. Royal Mail denies the accusation. The Natural History Museum in London has been ranked the most visited indoor attraction in the UK. The museum won the title for a second consecutive year. The attraction had over 4 million visitors last year, over 3 million more than the year before. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Rory. We're joined throughout the show today by author and former Labour MP Simon Danczuk and Conservative peer, that's Lord Daniel Moylan. But first, the Chancellor has announced 12 new investment zones across the country as part of his devolution package in the budget.
Each zone will get £80 million in funding and tax breaks and will be focused on life sciences, creative industries, digital technology, advanced manufacturing and green industries. We're joined now by Ben Houchen, Mayor of Tees Valley, to discuss this. Ben, thanks ever so much for joining us. What did you make of what the Chancellor had to say about these? How important are these investment zones going to be?
Well, I think they can be transformational for areas that have been left behind for decades in places like Teesside. So if you look at areas that have had huge underinvestment, they have lots of challenges, complex challenges that face investment, skills, and when they're competing with areas like Manchester, dare I say it, or even London, we have to try and bridge that gap. And if we're going to make sure that levelling up stays as a priority of this government, then investment zones can help bridge that gap because it makes us a more attractive place to invest, either because we can support that investment with cash or because we can support that investment with tax breaks to make us more appealing to businesses to come to places like Teesside or where there are other investment zones.
And how valuable is £80 million? I mean, lots of people say, well, it's a drop in the ocean when it comes to sort of levelling up and taking things away from London. £80 million isn't going to make a blind bit of difference. What do you think?
Yeah, but the critics always say that, right? Every time we announce anything on levelling up, it's not enough. But actually, if you look at what we've done as a government over the last 5 years in particular, particularly when Boris Johnson came in and really kind of owned the policy of levelling up. Actually, when you put that package together, it's a fantastic one. So I'll just give you a very, very quick rundown of Teesside. Not only do we have this now new investment zone that's worth £80 million, we've got the first and largest free port in the UK that's worth many hundreds of millions of pounds. We've had £300 million worth of cash on transport. We've had hundreds of millions of pounds on skills support. So actually, when you put it together, I would say Teesside is a shining example of what levelling up can be. And we need to spread that around the country more. I think it's fair to say we've done pretty well out of levelling up, and other areas should get the same amount of support. So, yeah, you're right. £80 million, is it the be-all and end-all? No. But actually, in context of those other things that come as well, actually it is a great additional tool to our armoury.
And Ben, it's not just the money. What I'm noticing now is the mayors are wanting more powers. So I'm wondering what extra powers you're wanting to take for your area.
Well, it's a long list. It's a long list, Esther. I would say, well, firstly, there's some really easy stuff that the government should be doing. And I think things like, for example, skills devolution should come to mayors. We already have control over the adult education budget. So anything post-19 education, we control the funding locally. That's not dictated by central government. But I do think that funding should come further down the train. So if you look post-16 education, if we're trying to create jobs like we are, for example, in our Freeport, we need to make sure that the local skills offering matches the jobs that are being created. And unless we've got control over the funding, it's very difficult to get colleges and other private sector skills organisations to make sure they put on the right courses for the right funding. So that's a really, really obvious one. I think there's some interesting stuff that the government could do around planning, particularly, for example, DCOs. Don't want to get too technical, but if this country wants to create more energy, indigenous energy, that we can support our energy security, if we want to create jobs in the UK around things like nuclear, the DCO process is pretty much broken, and it actually slows down investments in places like the Humber and Teesside and parts of the Northwest that would actually approve these things straight away rather than taking 4 or 5 years to go through a whole load of bureaucracy. So that's a very technical one. You've got the skills one that's quite a retail one. There's a whole lot of other things because, as you and I know, local areas are better prepared and have a better understanding of their local area requirements than any civil servant in Whitehall.
I just wonder, Ben, is there a democratic mandate for giving more devolution to elected mayors around the country? I mean, I should declare an interest. My dad was an elected mayor in Doncaster back in his in his time. But I mean, the turnout at some of these mayoral elections is tiny. It's minuscule. I mean, do these regional mayors really have that kind of democratic mandate to acquire all these powers? And is it not undermining the sort of United Kingdom with every different part of the country doing lots of different things?
So I think when it comes to a mandate point of view, obviously the UK government stood in its manifesto of levelling up, and part of that was more devolution across England. So absolutely there is a mandate from the UK government to deliver more devolution. I think on a local level, though, there is still a lot of cynicism around more devolution, because the automatic default for people is it's another level of bureaucracy, another politician. Do we need more politicians? Most people say absolutely not. So I would say, well, if you look at my election in 2017, you're right, Philip, the turnout was very low. I think it was about 16%. That's not great. We want more democratic engagement. But actually, where you have local leadership with a supportive government like we have in Teesside, my last election in 2021 saw that increase to more than 30%. So actually, there is an idea that actually with good local leadership, you get more civic engagement, you get more democratic engagement. And let's not forget, the North East is the region that rejected the North East Assembly by a referendum. And I think actually I had a UK...
I will end it there because there's a couple of questions I want to bring back to Daniel and Simon, but thank you very much indeed for joining us. I think that was a fair point that Phil raised there. You know, do they have the mandate? And is it bad for the country? We're dividing up the country by allowing different political groups to set up within.
I agree. I support the idea of investment zones, regeneration programmes in individual areas, particularly in the north. What I don't agree with is more devolution, and I've had a change of opinion on this because I have previously supported it. But the reality is there's no real evidence that devolving more powers to local areas improves the situation. You look at Greater Manchester, the Metrolink tram system is not very well run. Homelessness is out of control, and yet we have a directly elected mayor that we're proposing to give him more powers.
I think it really allows for greater political argument within a country. So you can argue what you do or don't want to, and you don't actually then move forward. So I think it's negative.
Is there a Rudy Giuliani lurking in every part of the country that can be an effective mayor?
Oh, he didn't end up very well, did he?
But at the time he did well for New York.
He did at the time. I think it's interesting how this policy has survived, irrespective of party government. I mean, this civil servants, I presume, Gordon Brown, civil servants, Osborne, everybody's been pushing this, sometimes against stiff resistance, for the last 25 years. Has it transformed the country? Well, we're still pushing it. I don't think it's transformed the country. Can I make one tiny point? Well, it's not tiny. All of these mayors are elected with an assembly that goes with them, that's meant to scrutinise them. But in order to change their budgets, nearly all of them require a 2/3 majority by law. I have an amendment being debated on Monday in the House of Lords, which would cut that to half. Because I think if you're going to give more money and more powers to mayors, there ought to be real democratic control over the budget from their assembly, and not just this rubber stamping that goes through at the moment.
And I think that's a question for our viewers. Do you feel better under whether it's Steve Rotherham, whether it's Sadiq Khan, whether it's Andy Burnham, whatever it is? Do you think it's better, or actually do you just think, you know, too many politicians, another layer of them, and as I said, just arguing between central government and the region? Anyway, let us know. But as the fallout from the budget continues, we're joined by Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College, Jonathan Portes. So we've heard lots of positive things, whether it was childcare, whether it's support there with the pensions package. Do you see the positive things that have happened there with the budget this week?
So I think in the short term, there are some positives, and in particular, the emphasis on the supply side of the economy, trying to get back people back to work by providing better childcare and help to disabled people. That is positive. I don't really see the case for quite such a generous tax bung to the top 1 or 2% of earners, which is what the pension tax changes are. They're a very large tax subsidy, frankly, to people like me and perhaps you who don't really need it. So that's just very odd. More broadly, though, the Chancellor has effectively abandoned the budget is fundamentally dishonest in that once you get beyond a couple of years, the numbers don't add up. He knows they don't add up. The OBR says they don't add up, and every independent expert says they don't add up. So in some sense, he's simply kicking the can beyond the next election because he's going to leave someone else to come in and clean up the mess that he's left for the public finances.
But this, I would have thought this was the kind of scenario you'd like to see. We've got the highest tax burden since World War II. I would have thought you would have welcomed that. We've got an expansion.
He's nodding.
Yeah. We've got an expansion of the welfare state in terms of childcare provision and things like that. So, I mean, surely this is a budget that surely people with your political standpoint should think is you're winning the argument with a Conservative government in place, aren't you?
I think that there's quite a lot of truth in that. So the increases in taxes are indeed necessary and welcome because if you want to fund decent quality public services, and that is what the public wants, then you have to pay for them. The problem is that I would rather see that done by a more wholesale tax reform that doesn't have, the tax system is a complete mess, actually. That's a consensus among
So what would you do, Jonathan? Jonathan, what would you do then?
Oh, I would increase taxes on capital gains, reduce some of the tax breaks for higher earning, for pensioners, well-off pensioners, that is, and people contributing a lot of money to their pension, people like me who benefited a lot from this budget, and increases taxes on wealth rather than further distorting the income tax system, which is one of the unfortunate side effects of what otherwise was actually quite a decent down payment on a decent childcare system. So as I say, there are some good things about this budget, but in the medium term, it just leaves a lot of holes in it.
We might be at the highest tax for sort of 70 years since World War II, but you'd increase taxation even more, is what you're saying.
Well, the reason that taxes have to go up is because over time, as societies get richer, more prosperous, and people live longer, you want to spend more on health and education. Every economist will tell you that is the right thing to do. It's the thing which, most voters will tell you that, but actually economists will also say, actually, you need to do that. Now that spending on health, education, and other pensions has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? Now, you could, if you really wanted a much lower tax burden, you could privatize the NHS. There are perfectly, some economists would argue for that. There's a perfectly reasonable case to be made for it in pure economic terms. But if you're not going to privatize the NHS, and that doesn't seem to be on the political agenda, then you do have to pay for it. And if you're going to have to pay for it, then you are going to have to, over time, raise taxes. That's just arithmetic.
Jonathan Portes, thank you very much indeed. We've got comments, two things to come back from there. He would see, and I think the left would see, I don't know whether you would see, Simon, taxes to go up even higher. And then he talks about privatisation of the NHS, which certainly nobody from the right could ever say.
Yeah, I don't agree with Jonathan in terms of increasing taxes. I think we need to radically reform the NHS. I think it's just wasteful. It doesn't work as a system. So that's actually a way of saving money. We don't need to raise more taxes to pay for an inefficient NHS. We need to.
But he's right, though, isn't he, that no government's going to cut spending on the NHS, are they? They're going to keep increasing it, and therefore.
I mean, if anybody could do it, should do it. It's probably the Conservative Party. But we return to West Streeting again, and I think he's on the right of the Labour Party. He's the shadow health secretary, and I think he will.
Well, I do see there's a lot of noise from that, from the Labour, from Jonathan Portes there, from I said West Streeting about the privatisation, but the increase of taxation. I'm looking at the figures here. An average family will be paying £4,200 more in tax by the time the general election comes. Jonathan's wanting even more tax going on them.
Yeah, well, of course, this is what the left want. They want more tax. They want a totally socialised economy. Just coming on this thing about pensions, by the way, this idea this is a big tax break for pensions. Is there anybody out there who actually understands how pensions work? You take your capital and it goes into a pension, you get a tax break. But when you take the pension out, you pay tax on that capital, not just on the interest, on that capital. Now, it's true you get a lump sum, but the effect is if you're a 40% taxpayer, you'll be paying 30% tax on your own capital, on your own savings, when you take your pension out.
Did you read the...
All this money is coming back to the Treasury. This is not costing 850 million a year.
Did you read the story yesterday? Because people are saying, well, whose pension pot is going to be that big that would require maybe 2 million or whatever it is in it? And they said, well, it was the doctors, that's who it was aimed at, surgeons, doctors, but also the civil servants who are pushing this through. Did you read the story yesterday?
Yes,
who had the final say on that?
I'd have a look at train drivers too and see where they stood or their pension scheme. I know a bit about that.
Cynical, a lot of you. Anyway, coming up, we'll be asking, are we giving away too much in foreign aid and to the wrong countries? So stay with us.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:23. Now, Britain has sent more than £2 billion worth of aid to India over the last 5 years, and a review has found that it was a complete waste of money.
The UK government has failed to achieve value for money in supporting inclusive growth and poverty reduction. That's according to an audit from the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. Here to discuss this is Stephen Bryan, Director of Policy at the Legatum Institute. So, did you read the report?
I did, yes.
And its findings, do you agree with that?
I would say broadly, yes. I think there's been a focus on too many small projects, not focusing on some of the fundamental challenges that India faces. I mean, we just heard about devolution. If you think about the disparity of states in India, from Mumbai, the city, twice the population of Portugal, twice the GDP of Portugal, yet Portugal contributes aid into the European community. On the other hand, places like Bihar or Uttar Pradesh, poverty rates of 50%, no economic growth. India has it within itself to grow, to improve, and to develop. And I think it would be much more powerful if Indians owned that challenge than sought aid from outside.
I mean, should we be giving... I mean, I was looking at the figures that in 2021, India was the 11th largest recipient of UK aid, more than Bangladesh, more than Kenya. Lots of our viewers will probably be thinking, well, hold on a minute, they're one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Why on earth are we, that's sort of struggling economically, pouring money into a country that presumably should be able to sort out its own problems?
It should, and I think it's actually a better place to sort out its own problems than people coming from across from the UK. But let me give you a contrast with another ex-colony. I've just come back yesterday afternoon from Malawi, which has been undergoing, severe challenges with Cyclone Freddy. Hundreds died. They don't have the capacity to help out there. They've had to borrow helicopters from Zambia to get out rescue missions. India has a space program. There's the contrast. It's a place like Malawi where the sort of moral imperative for aid is absolutely essential, not in developing nations like India.
I'm wondering, is it time to relook at foreign aid, full stop? As you say, the places that do need it. But some people in this country might say now, with so many asylum seekers coming to the UK, with so many people that we're looking after here, should that money be spent at home first, sorting out the issues of sort of mass migration across the world?
I think you need to think about it as two different issues. One is about money, and there's a strong argument that money and resources should first of all be about addressing the weakest in communities in Britain. There's also an issue, though, about capacity and experience and skills, where actually the most valuable thing developing nations like Malawi and India of old would benefit from is actually the knowledge transfer. That could come through from FDI or indeed even exchange programs with civil servants helping to bolster government capacity. A strong, effective government in each of these nations is going to do far more good than 100 projects on the ground.
I will actually reinforce that. I went a long time ago to Liberia with the Royal Society of Medicine, and sort of what people had given to Liberia, they couldn't use. They didn't have the infrastructure or even the electricity or this, that, the other. So whether it was medicine or equipment, they couldn't, or the money, it was difficult to get it out. But they could with this knowledge transfer, and that's what the medics were going out there to give them knowledge.
Yeah, so the best programs are about building knowledge, building experience, building capacity. But it's not just in medicine. It needs to be across the economy and across government. And there are many ways of doing that that don't necessarily cost a fortune. And that, I think, is where Britain and other developed nations should be focusing the energies rather than thinking about it in terms of money.
Is there an... I mean, my perception is, and you might tell me I'm wrong, but my perception is that other countries use overseas aid in a much more political way. So my perception is the US sort of will say to people, look, we want your votes at the United Nations, and if we can't get your votes at the United Nations, it might put your aid programme in jeopardy. And that and obviously China seemed to be using it on a much more geopolitical basis. Should the UK go down that road of being much more political and seeing it as a transaction, or should we be looking at it simply in poverty alleviation terms?
There's a risk with the transaction that you create resentment in other countries, because what they see is aid is actually serving the interests of the people in the US or in Britain rather than them. So I would say be very, very careful about going down that road. And I would argue much more, not simply about poverty relief. I think that's addressing the wrong problem. It is about development, it's about prosperity. It's actually how do you grow the economy? How do you create genuine political equality so that everybody is part of society, part of the economy? And that's what's going to lift people out of poverty rather than direct poverty alleviation.
Daniel?
Well, I think, take it in stages. First of all, I think we're all agreed that when there's a disaster like we've seen in Syria and Turkey recently with the earthquake, things like that, Britain should be there to help, and it's not just a matter of money. As Stephen said, very often we can best help with skills, like the firefighters we sent out there who were able to identify bodies, find people, at least many of them still alive, thankfully, in the early days, in the rubble and things like that. So that sort of aid, I think, should be a complete priority for us, and we should be putting a lot of effort into that. When it comes to other stuff, I think Stephen's absolutely right. There are countries where the level of poverty breaks your heart, and there is something that we can do about that, but it's got to be to help them to do it themselves, and it's got to be focused, and it's got to be checked. Now, we are checking it, and the one good thing we can say about this is that we actually have an audit process that is honest enough to say when something hasn't worked. But unless we learn the right lessons from that and actually focus and deliver it, I think that's
Simon?
mistake. I think it's perverse that we've had a target. The Labour Party has a target of spending 3% of GDP. Why would you have a target? So you're having to shovel money into spending on projects, which is, as I've seen when I've been a Member of Parliament, you go to different countries and see some of these projects, and they do look dubious. You don't think that anybody's getting any value for money out of them. So we certainly shouldn't have a target. I think the money should be used in a more political way, a more transactional way, and particularly around the Commonwealth. We've left the European Union. I think we could do more around the Commonwealth and supporting those countries.
Stephen, what about this idea of the target? It does seem crazy that you say you're going to spend a certain amount of money before you've even decided what you need to spend the money on. And why, I mean, surely we should get rid of this arbitrary figure.
I believe we should, there's a debate to be had about the real goals of it. Is it political? Is it transactional? Is it supporting development? Have that debate and let the
but for too long, you see, people haven't wanted to have that debate. You've been seen as sort of mean or whatever it was if you're not handing over the money. But really it's, well, where does it go? What do people want? Who are you to tell people what they want?
And does it go, because lots of people will think, you know, all this aid is the old maxim that it's taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries. Is the truth in that maxim?
Yes. I mean, as the report highlighted, too many middle-class Indians were benefiting from quite a number of these investments. If those investments are genuinely commercial, that private companies here engage in them and work out the economic benefits, if they're not commercial, they have to have a real focus on the most vulnerable in these societies.
Stephen Bryan, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to read out some of the views because we were talking about childcare and the support there, and if that's right. Rico says to me, in my opinion, it's all very good flooding funds into childcare to get parents back into work, which might be a great relief to them, but what it misses out is creating the incentives to actually work.
Denny says, my grandchild never went to the early years, which was scrapped, and she's one of the top students in primary school. So all this blurb about early years is rubbish. Being home with parents or grandparents is the best education for early years.
And Chris says, I never did agree with the Blair-Brown drive to get both parents into work within months of giving birth. If you look at the early years on the continent, it's far more focused on social skills, communication than rigid curricula, and that could help the development of the child.
I should just say that Sue here says that Neil Leach is correct. Raising the ratio of children to 1 to 5 is a terrible idea, cheapening and devaluing childcare even more than it has been already. And Michael agrees with Sue. He says, my daughter runs a nursery and is struggling because the amount the government pays for 3 places is nowhere near enough. And she says that the new ratio is unworkable.
I just wonder now, though, are these companies really companies? If all of the money, if they're not private enterprises, is all coming from the state, what I wonder is, then aren't you saying that really primary school should start a little bit younger? It seems ridiculous to me that we've got a cycle of money going to supposedly private companies and all they want is more...
Nationalise the childminders.
Well, just make it a year earlier at school. Just the thought, simple there. Anyway, coming up, we'll be having a look at St Patrick's Day celebrations taking place over in Northern Ireland. See you after this short break. But first, it's time for news headlines with Rory.
Good morning. It's 11:33. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. It is understood that striking doctors could meet the Health Secretary to discuss a pay rise as soon as this afternoon. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay increase for junior doctors, saying their pay has fallen in real terms by 26% since 2008. Meanwhile, NHS workers will now vote on whether to accept a new pay offer, which includes a 5% pay rise from April. But Chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds, says pay talks should have happened sooner.
Rishi Sunak and his ministers did not sit down and have that proper negotiation on pay for a very, very long time. And it's been estimated that about 140,000 operations and appointments were cancelled because of the impact of that industrial action. And that's even before you take the junior doctors' strike into account that's just started. So, you know, the Conservatives have got to learn from this. They can't make the same mistakes when it comes to the junior doctors.
Meanwhile, the Education Secretary will meet with unions today as part of intensive talks over teacher pay, conditions and workload reduction. The unions have agreed not to strike over the next 2 weeks as discussions continue. The founder of Anne Summers, Jacqueline Gold, has died at the age of 62. In a statement, her family said Jacqueline died yesterday evening after battling stage 4 breast cancer for 7 years. She was made a CBE in 2016 for services to women in business, entrepreneurship and social enterprise. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 11:38. Some of your views coming in on various different stories. One of them here from Richard, and that's on the lifetime allowance changes for pensions in the budget. He said it's a good thing that Jeremy Hunt has done that, not just to get more doctors, but also industry investors. The pension funds will invest in profit-making businesses and the tax incomes will rise. The Labour Party are out of date.
Kurt says, I'm all for Stop the Boats pledge by the government. One pledge Rishi Sunak missed out on, though, was Stop the HS2.
Yeah.
That would have been another certain vote winner.
Yes, well,
Don't we agree with that,
I
I think?
totally... And Angie said, now, this is what... I think she's got a good point here. Devolution is a bad for the United Kingdom, a bad idea for the United Kingdom. It doesn't work and just creates political tyrants, more divisions and separation. How much do these devolved parliaments, mayors and police commissioners cost the British taxpayer? The people of the devolved parliaments should hold referendums to ask if they want to keep them or scrap them.
And I like Stuart's comment here. He said the return to work budget initiatives are all very well, but when are the media and MPs going to start talking about those who can afford to quitting the workforce because they do not wish to have woke workplaces forced on them? That might be why people are giving up work. You see, nothing to do with
they don't
pension
like
allowances or anything.
They don't like the environment when they get there. But look, it's been another busy week for the royal household. Joining us now to discuss the latest is Royal News, GB News royal reporter, and that's Cameron Walker there. So, do you know what? I don't understand. Please explain to me, what is Prince Harry doing? What is this court case all about? I know he's hoping not to get to have to stand on trial, as it were, but what's he doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated. There are a number of legal battles Prince Harry is having with both the British press and the British government, but today it's a preliminary hearing into an article that the Mail on Sunday wrote about his battle with the Home Office over their decision not to allow him to pay for his own police protection when he's in the UK. So I'm just going to read the headline of the article that the Mail wrote. So they said, exclusive, how Prince Harry tried to keep legal fights with government over police bodyguards a secret. Then, just minutes after the story broke, his PR machine tried to put a positive spin on the dispute. So what does that mean, you may be asking? Well, in July, a judge ruled that, in Harry's favour, that the article was defamatory because to a normal reader, the judge said it would suggest that Harry was responsible for what his PR team put out about him. And the PR teams was trying to spin the fact that Prince Harry, right from the start, had always been willing to pay for his own police protection, or offered to pay for his police protection, whereas legal documents actually show that's not the case. And he didn't actually make that offer until legal proceedings had started on the Home Office case. Are you with me so far? It's very complicated, isn't it? So Associated Newspapers Limited, who owns the Mail on Sunday, they're contesting what Prince Harry is saying. They're saying that the article was honest opinion and it didn't cause any serious harm to Prince Harry, so therefore it's not defamatory. Prince Harry is saying that he has always made, or his lawyers are saying he has always made the offer to pay for his own police protection. He did that way back in January 2020. And the Mail on Sunday is saying that's not the case because legal documents show that is not the case. So it's a very complicated legal thing that we've got going on this morning. It's the preliminary hearing today. At the same time, of course, he's suing the Home Office over police protection. He's also suing Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering, i.e. alleged phone hacking. The same with the News Group newspapers. So, to summarise, he's at war with the British press and he's at war with the Home Office.
You'd like to be his lawyer, wouldn't you?
All I'd say, he's got too much time on his hands. He needs to go out and start working properly. I mean, what is he doing? A tangled web he does weave.
Yeah, I think Prince Harry is, in his own words, is a very damaged individual. I think it does all stem back.
Well, he's damaging everybody else now. He needs to stay quiet.
He's damaging himself.
On to happier things, Red Nose Day.
Yeah, Red Nose Day. Prince William is going to be appearing in a film raising the spotlight, or shining a spotlight, I should say, on homelessness and the rise of homelessness because of the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom. He's speaking to two individuals who have experienced homelessness, who are part of a charity who is supported by Red Nose Day, the BBC charity initiative. We had a tease in that trailer of what Prince William was going to have to say, but we'll have to wait until tonight to hear exactly what Prince William is discussing with these two individuals. We know from Kensington Palace that Prince Harry is very much... Sorry, not Prince Harry. Prince William, homelessness is very much going to be a big theme this year for him. He's patron of Centrepoint, the Passage to homelessness charities, something which Princess Diana started back in the day.
But just a cheeky comment, I think it was, from Isabel Oakeshott, offering to do Prince Andrew's memoirs if need be. I know he was thinking about doing another documentary. Emily Maitlis's didn't go so well, but how about this, a book as well?
Yeah, I mean, there are reports that Prince Andrew is writing a memoir, or wants to write a memoir, so perhaps Isabel Oakeshott would be a good choice. It's not been confirmed by Prince Andrew's team.
Just don't give her your WhatsApp messages.
No, don't give him WhatsApp messages. But also, it's funny you mentioned Emily Maitlis's interview with him, that damning interview of Prince Andrew, which made him step back as a working member of the royal family. Netflix is making the whole series of events up until that interview, obtaining the interview into a drama starring Keeley Hawes, Billy Piper, and all the rest of it. So I think it's going to be an uncomfortable year for Prince Andrew.
But he says he does say he wants to do another interview, doesn't he?
Well, allegedly, yes. Reportedly, he does. It's not been
If you were
confirmed.
his advisor, Cameron, would you say no more interviews?
I mean, it's not for me to comment. I don't think Esther.
All right,
but,
well, if not, I'm going to ask Daniel, would you say, Prince Andrew, no more interviews?
Yeah, generally, I think he needs to develop. I mean, he'd be happier in life if he developed other skills.
Or some skills, rather, perhaps. I think he should step back, actually. But Andrew Lowney's writing a biography on Prince Andrew, and he does real revelations. He did the Mountbattens, and he's done others as well. So Andrew Lowney's currently writing a book on it. That will be explosive.
Very interesting.
Well, Cameron, you're in a job for a lot longer. There's lots more coming down that road there. Thanks very much indeed. Now, towns and cities across Northern Ireland and many other parts of the world will host parades and other festivities today to celebrate St Patrick's Day.
Some of the biggest celebrations will be held in Downpatrick in County Down, where the patron saint is believed to be buried.
Well, we're joined now by GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Has he got the hat on? Is he all ready? Is he celebrating? Oh, he could be celebrating. He's celebrating so much now. Here he is. He's just taken his big hat off, hasn't he? That's his leprechaun hat. That's what took the time.
Well, welcome to Downpatrick. Indeed, this is the town where it is believed that St Patrick is buried, along with St Bridget and St Columba. Their remains brought back here in the 12th century by John de Courcy. Of course, St Patrick was a young British man kidnapped and sold into slavery in Ireland, escaped to France, and then returned with Christianity and converted us all. And he did it all inside Lent. Of course, it becomes St Patrick's Day celebrated across the world, not only because we're Irish, but because it's right in the middle of Lent, so it offers that little bit of a break to what's going on around the religious terms at that time. But yes, last night started a 3-day celebration. It could turn into 4 if England get beat by the Irish rugby team on the Six Nations in Dublin on Saturday, of course. There'll be plenty of green beer flowing at that point. But yes, St Patrick's Day, all about celebrations. And right now I'm standing in some of the floats in front of them that are arriving to take part in this, it's basically a carnival. Registration just going on down the road from us here. So these floats are arriving a little bit late. It is a little bit overcast, a little bit of rain interfering. And last night in Belfast there was a nice concert there as well. Only for families, it must be added. But some great singers at it, some great times at it. But of course the weather did dampen spirits just a little bit. Now, just as I talk now, there's more floats going past us down in there. The parade itself will start in around 12:30. Should take about an hour and a half to go through the town. And that will be along with many others. There's one in Belfast, Newry, Armagh, and of course right across the Republic of Ireland as well. The largest of them all being in Dublin. And don't forget that most Irish politicians are in New York and Washington for St Patrick's Day celebrations there, along with Joe Biden, who's due to visit Northern Ireland in the following month.
Dougie Beattie, thanks ever so much for keeping us abreast of what's going on St Patrick's Day in Downpatrick. I was shocked. He said that everybody was in, all the politicians were in New York and all this. I thought they were all in Cheltenham. I thought everyone from Northern Ireland and Ireland, I thought they all had a pilgrimage to Cheltenham. I thought there would be nobody there. Dougie was on his own there, wasn't he?
Will you be having a Guinness after the show?
I don't actually drink Guinness, but if you offered me one, I'd have a go. I mean, I'm much more Irish than Joe Biden is, so I think I'm entitled.
You're much more eloquent as well, Daniel.
I
if you
don't know
mind
about
saying
that. He's a great speaker. Ever since he stole that speech from Neil Kinnock about 30 years ago, remember that?
Yes.
He was caught out
Simon's
for
looking
doing
like
that.
he remembers him doing that. He's stealing the words.
He learned his speaking
You've got to be
skills from
very
Neil Kinnock.
careful if you're a politician, taking on somebody else's words as a politician.
Remember that?
Didn't Melania Trump do that as well? And I think
are you having a Guinness?
I'll be having a Guinness with my Irish neighbour, Bill Jingles. I'll be drinking with him this evening, having a Guinness or two in Pimlico. So come and join me if you fancy one.
Well, look, now we're joined by Sarah Robertson to take a look at the biggest stories from the entertainment world. So go on, crack on, give us them.
Yes. Well, we've just heard today the very sad news that Ann Summers the founder of Ann Summers, Jacqueline Gold, has passed away this morning. She had a 7-year battle with breast cancer, and that comes just 2 months after losing her father, who is the chairman of West Ham, David Gold. So it's just very sad for the Gold family. 2 massive losses. And she was such a trailblazer in business as well. So I'm really upset by this. I just think she was an amazing woman, and she spoke really bravely about her breast cancer battle and how it inspired her to sort of drove her forward. But sadly, she has passed away. So very, very, very sad news. On to other things, though, from America. So you were obviously talking about Prince Harry before. Oprah Winfrey has now waded in again on the whole Harry and Meghan, will they or will they not come to the coronation? The jury's still out on this, but Oprah's been speaking to her friend Gayle King on the news channel, and she said that they haven't come to ask her for her advice yet, which is interesting. So they probably will. But if they do, she will tell them they have to do what's best for them and what's best for the children. So that was Oprah's sage advice.
Was that to go or not?
Just does not impress.
What does that mean, though? Is that to go or not to go?
I mean, it seems to me she was asked a question. She didn't really want to say too much. She said, "Oh, it's down to them." And they haven't asked for my advice, and yet it's sort of global news. It does show, I guess, the power of Harry just sort of non-stop talking, isn't it? But there was nothing in that. I followed it myself.
Yes, well, there you go. So that was on Oprah. But just on Harry and Meghan, what was interesting is they weren't at Elton's Oscar party on Sunday night. There's no invite there. They were snubbed. And Oprah's obviously given away that she hasn't had a recent conversation with them. So just shows that things are changing.
That's the point now, though, isn't it? If they reveal everything everybody says to them to make a few bob, whether it's in a book, a Netflix or whatever it is, nobody will want to spend an evening with them knowing all it is gossip for the papers.
Well, exactly. And you mentioned as well earlier on, Esther, about what's Harry doing for a job. And you've got his brother, Prince William, who's going to be talking about homelessness tonight in a short film that he's done for Comic Relief, which is coming this evening, which is very important. He's following up on his mother, Princess, the late Princess Diana, on the work that she did with homelessness to raise attention. And Prince William says it's very important to him, and he's going with that as well. So we're going to see that this evening on Comic Relief.
And we'll be back to you in a second, Sarah.
But now, today, we were talking about Prince Harry. He's hoping to win his libel case against the Mail on Sunday without the case going to trial.
The Prince is suing over an article alleging that the King's youngest son had tried to keep details of his security fight with the British government secret.
Join us now from outside the Royal Courts of Justice is GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins. Paul, tell us what's the latest going on in there.
Yeah, so we've had an hour of the hearing today. Let me just very quickly give you the background to that, Phil, because this is quite a technical case. If I just read you the headline from the Daily Mail article that is being contended, it was printed in February last year, and it says how Prince Harry tried to keep his legal fight with the government over police bodyguards a secret, and then it goes on to say, then, just minutes after the story broke, his PR machine tried to put a positive spin on the dispute. The article essentially about Prince Harry's security arrangements being withdrawn or pared back by the Home Office, and the coverage of Prince Harry's request for a judicial review into that Home Office decision. Now, there are certain parts to this libel case. The first part was last summer when a judge ruled the article was defamatory, and that the article gave readers the impression that Prince Harry was intentionally trying to mislead and confused. So the judge ruling that the article, parts of it were defamatory, but he rejected the claim that the article accused Prince Harry of lying. Now, the two sides paused in December. They were trying to reach an agreement. They couldn't. So now we're back in court for another one-day hearing. And it could be wound up today or it could carry on to trial. But this morning we've heard from Prince Harry's lawyer, Justin Rushbrook, who said that they want the judge to dismiss Associated Newspapers' defence, Associated Newspapers, the owner of the Daily Mail, or give a summary judgment in Prince Harry's favour. If that happens today, then there will be no trial, and effectively Prince Harry wins his case. Associated Newspapers' defence, however, is that it was an honestly held opinion and did no damage to Prince Harry. Notes, though, the question to the judge, Mr. Justice Nicklin, from Prince Harry's lawyer, which is that whether factual allegations relied upon by Associated Newspapers were capable of supporting that opinion. In other words, was the Daily Mail telling the truth when it printed this article?
Paul, is he looking for money here? Will he get paid out? Is this another money-earning that he's going on, expedition he's going on?
He is seeking damages. Now, at a previous hearing, the judge said that the amount of money he was looking for, which off the top of my head, it was around about £600,000, he said that was too much. So he's seeking somewhere in the region of £300,000 to £400,000 in damages. The Daily Mail is seeking, if it were to win, it's seeking a lot more money than that, so he will lose money from this case. And of course, it's not the only case that he's fighting. He also has other cases ongoing, along with certain celebrities and the mother of Stephen Lawrence, against Associated Newspapers, the Mirror Group, and News Group as well, who own The Sun and used to own the News of the World. All of those cases regard obtaining private information illegally, most notably via phone hacking. But so we'll be back here a lot over the summer, over the next sort of 3, 4, 5 months with Prince Harry and the press.
Paul Hawkins, thank you very much indeed for that update live there.
Now, we've been having lots of views come in, but there's lots about devolution, funnily enough, and not very many fans of devolution. In fact, Glyn says here, I voted for devolution, but it's been an absolute catastrophe. We need another vote to see if it's still popular. I would suggest it absolutely isn't. And Alan says, devolution, terrible idea. Areas start to push their own agenda, sometimes against national policy. You get mayors who think they are demigods who go against the public good.
And that's what you said, Simon.
Are you surprised about this backlash to devolution?
I'm not surprised that the public think this at all. I've had a change of opinion on it. I think we're a small country. I think we can control and manage the country from the centre. I think that's quite capable with enough devolution. Certainly don't need any more.
I think it causes inner strains and inner unhappiness within the country too. It's just another layer of sniping and who has control of what's going on.
William Hague always used to say, Yorkshire people don't want to run Yorkshire, they want to run the world. I think he was onto something there.
It's gaining traction, though, up in the northeast, where I'm from. So it is, yes, definitely.
What is?
The idea of devolution.
Oh, no, it's definitely from the people who've got it and want it, definitely, and they're asking for more power. Does it work? That's the question, isn't it? Does it work, Sarah Robertson? Thank you very much indeed for the latest showbiz, what was going on. Simon Danchuk, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and also Lord Moylan here. What a day it's been. So thank you. Next, we've got Mark Longhurst. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be back with you tomorrow at 10.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.